Bumpy Johnson smashed through a farmhouse door and ripped 3 girls off rusted chains in a KKK dungeon. Blood on their wrists, hymns rattling in their throats. He ignored the police station, clamped the Klansmen to the same iron hooks, welded the door shut, left them screaming into concrete. When law abandons black daughters, do you dial 911 or become the bullet? Harlem wasn't just scared in August 1965. It was bleeding out in slow motion. 3 girls ripped from the streets in 8 days. No screams, no witnesses, no bodies rotting in alleys where junkies could stumble over them. Just mothers clawing at precinct doors and fathers standing guard with shotguns, scanning every passing car like snipers hunting targets. The first girl, 16. Yellow ribbon choking her braids tight, vanished between her stoop and the corner store. 30 feet she'd walked 1,000 times, evaporated like steam off hot asphalt. The second never made it home from choir practice. They found her hymnal face down in the gutter, pages bloated with rainwater, open to "His eye is on the sparrow." Ironic, considering God's eye had clearly looked somewhere else when she was dragged into the dark. Sarah Wallace was number 3, 14 years old, snatched in broad daylight on a Tuesday afternoon, walking home from school with her book bag still strapped to her back. The mothers went to the cops first. Fatal mistake. They brought photographs, daughters in church dresses, smiling, breathing, real. The desk sergeant glanced at the pictures like he was examining livestock manifests, not human beings. He slid them back across the counter without bothering to fake sympathy. "Girls that age run off," he grunted, lighting a cigarette and blowing smoke at the water-stained ceiling. "Probably turning tricks in the Bronx by now." Mrs. Davis slammed her fist down hard enough to crack the wood. "My daughter is 13 years old," she hissed, voice fracturing like glass under pressure. The sergeant shrugged, took another drag. Told her to come back next week if the girl was still missing. Like she was a lost umbrella. Like she was nothing. When Mrs. Wallace tried filing an official report, the cop tore her daughter's photograph in half, right down the middle. Ripped Sarah's face clean apart while her mother stood there bleeding from invisible wounds. "We got real crimes to solve," he sneered, dropping both pieces in the wastebasket. "Not teenage whores chasing trouble." Mrs. Wallace didn't cry. She'd burned through tears 3 days ago. She just fished both halves from the trash, smoothed them flat like they were scripture, and walked out knowing the law had murdered her daughter's chances before the paperwork dried. Harlem transformed overnight. The smell changed. First fried chicken grease couldn't mask the metallic tang of fear that settled over the neighborhood like nerve gas. Fathers who used to shoot dice and talk shit now stood silent, arms crossed, eyes tracking every vehicle that slowed, every white face that didn't belong. They stopped smoking. Smoking meant looking down. Looking down meant missing the predator circling their daughters like sharks tasting blood in dark water. Mothers chained themselves to their girls now. School, church, corner store. Nobody walked alone. At night, windows stayed open despite the suffocating heat, ears tuned to every sound that didn't match Harlem's rhythm. Laughter died before it could grow. Even the junkies nodding in doorways sensed something worse than withdrawal was hunting these streets. Bumpy Johnson heard about it the way he heard everything through invisible wires running under Harlem's skin, carrying information faster than Western Union. He sat in 22 West's back room nursing bourbon he never drank, just held like a prop. Men came to him without invitation. Power doesn't send invitations, it creates gravity. Men orbit whether they want to or not. They spoke in whispers about daughters locking bedroom doors from inside, about wives gripping kitchen knives at 3 a.m., waiting for footsteps that never came, about a neighborhood choking on its own fear. Bumpy didn't interrupt. He counted. Hours between vanishings. Victim ages. Last seen locations. He was building a map in his skull. Connecting dots cops were too lazy or racist to notice. Mrs. Wallace kicked through the velvet curtain on day 8. Didn't knock. Just burst in like she was storming a machine gun nest. The poker game died instantly. 4 men froze as this woman stood there shaking, not from fear. From rage so pure it could peel paint off steel. "I want my Sarah back," she said, not begging. Commanding. Her voice had gone past tears into that frozen territory where grief hardens into something that cuts. Bumpy didn't move for 5 seconds. Then he swept his arm across the table. Chips exploded. Cards flew. Cash scattered like shrapnel. The other players scrambled back, chairs screaming across linoleum, understanding without words that the game had just shifted from poker to murder. Bumpy stood slowly, adjusting his cufflinks with the precision of a man chambering rounds. He looked at Mrs. Wallace the way generals look at maps before invasions. "That makes 3, he said quietly. The room's temperature dropped 20 degrees. Nobody breathed. The air thickened like somebody had pumped wet concrete into the oxygen. Eddie, a numbers runner who'd watched men gutted over $10 debts later, swore the ice in Bumpy's bourbon cracked without anyone touching the glass. According to witnesses, the silence that followed lasted exactly 17 seconds and felt like drowning in cold honey. Mrs. Wallace didn't understand yet. She just knew Harlem's most dangerous man had stopped gambling to focus on her daughter's ghost. And that felt like the first real power she'd held since Sarah vanished. Bumpy walked her to the door, hand barely grazing her elbow. Respect, not control. At the threshold, he stopped. "Go home. Lock your doors. Don't open them unless you recognize my voice or see my car." She nodded, not understanding, just trusting. After she left, Bumpy turned to the 4 frozen men. "Find me everything," he ordered. "Times, routes, witnesses, every detail those pig cops were too stupid or hateful to collect." He let silence stretch like piano wire. "Move fast, because whoever took those girls thinks Harlem's too scared to bite back. I'm about to shove their assumptions down their throats until they choke to death on them." Eddie cleared his throat. "Boss, what if the girls are all ready?" "Then we find the bodies." Bumpy cut him off, voice colder than autopsy tables. "And we make sure the men who put them there die slower than anything has ever died in the history of dying. Now move before I decide you're wasting my time." The men scattered like roaches under sudden light. Bumpy poured fresh bourbon, actually drank it this time, felt it burn down his throat like liquid vengeance looking for a target. He stared at scattered cards on the floor. 3 aces showing, 3 girls gone. The devil was gambling in his neighborhood. Bumpy Johnson was about to teach him why you don't play cards in Harlem without paying the house in blood. No ransom demand. That was the broken string in an orchestra of wrongness that made Bumpy's gut scream warnings. He sat in his office at 3 a.m. staring at 3 photographs spread across his desk like crime scene evidence. 42 years running Harlem, bootlegging wars, numbers rackets, turf battles that painted sidewalks red had taught him one iron law: criminals want something: money, territory, revenge, respect. But these girls' families had nothing worth stealing. Mrs. Wallace cleaned rich white folks' toilets for $2 an hour. Davis's father drove cabs 16 hours daily just to keep lights burning. The third family lived in a walk-up where radiators only worked Tuesdays and cockroaches outvoted humans 3-1. Nobody called demanding cash. Nobody mailed severed fingers or bloody hair to prove they meant business. No threats. No demands, just silence. Not peaceful silence, predator silence. the kind that comes before claws close around throats. "This isn't about money," Bumpy said to empty air. He poured scotch, then poured it back. He needed clarity. Rage was already fogging his vision's edges. Slavers wanted profit. Kidnappers wanted ransom. Even psychopaths left signatures, bodies, patterns, something feeding their sick egos. But this felt older. This was hunting for sport. He deployed his ghost army people so woven into Harlem's fabric they'd become invisible. Mrs. Cartwright, 73, who'd spent a decade in her third-floor window watching life scroll past like reruns. 10-year-old Marcus selling papers on Lenox and 135th. Small enough adults talked over his head, forgetting kids have perfect memory. Luther, the neighborhood drunk who'd been stone sober 15 years but played the part so well. Cops kicked him awake and kept walking, never noticing he remembered everything. They came back with fragments that assembled into nightmares. Mrs. Cartwright remembered a gray van, not usual delivery trucks. This one was newer, cleaner. It appeared 3 times in 10 days, always mid-afternoon when crowds made one more vehicle invisible. Marcus remembered it because the white men inside stared at him wrong, not cop boredom, something hungrier, colder, like cats watching crippled birds. Luther provided the detail that froze Bumpy's blood electrician uniforms. "Apex HVAC, he said, scratching his beard. Watched them 20 minutes once. Never entered a building. Just cruised slow. Real slow. Like they were shopping for merchandise. Bumpy sent a runner to investigate. Apex HVAC existed licensed, bonded, Westchester County-based, 40 miles north. But when his man called requesting furnace work, the receptionist said they didn't service Harlem. "We only work north of city limits," she'd said, voice sharp as January wind. So why was their van circling 125th Street like sharks smelling blood? The runner had one more detail. "Boss, I got close when they opened the back doors, saw tools, chains, and folded in the corner, Confederate flag. Red, blue, stars and bars. They weren't hiding it. They just knew nobody would look." Bumpy dismissed everyone, locked the door. He stood at his window, watching dawn bleed over Lenox Avenue like hemorrhaging. Below, mothers dragged daughters toward school, gripping hands so tight knuckles went white. Fathers clustered on corners pretending to laugh, pretending normalcy could be rebuilt with noise. But Bumpy saw through it, saw fear vibrating underneath like high-voltage current. Their neighborhood, their fortress, had been invaded by something that didn't follow rules they understood. "They're not here for profit," Bumpy told his reflection. "They're here because they think they can be." Real slavers, historical ones who built empires on black flesh, were monsters. Yes, but transactional monsters. They stole people to sell them, work them, profit from them. Evil had logic, cost-benefit written in blood and cotton. But these men driving 4 hours from Westchester, risking exposure, risking violence from men like Bumpy who didn't dial 911 when problems needed solving, not for money, for control. The same poison living in that Confederate flag. The same sickness making cops tear up Mrs. Wallace's photo. The belief, bone-deep conviction that black lives existed for white amusement. White power. White cruelty. They didn't need these girls for anything practical. They just wanted proving they could take them. Bumpy finally drank that scotch. It burned, but not like the furnace building in his chest. He'd fought cops thinking badges made them bulletproof. Fought Italian mob trying to muscle Harlem in the 40s. Sent them back in ambulances and pine boxes. Fought every species of predator thinking Harlem was weak because it was black. But this was different. This wasn't business. This was race war, the kind ending in mass graves, not negotiated truces. He picked up the 3 photographs again. 16, 14, 13. Girls who should have been giggling about boys, worrying about algebra, wondering if their hair looked right for Sunday service. Instead, somewhere alive or dead. Bumpy didn't know, in the hands of men who drove past them like shopping for livestock. Men who probably went home afterward. Kissed wives, tucked in blonde daughters, slept soundly because they'd never once considered black girls counted as somebody's daughters too. Slavers wanted profit, Bumpy repeated like an epitaph he was already writing. These men want control. He crushed his cigarette in the crystal ashtray so hard glass cracked clean through. Those present would later describe the sound as resembling small bones breaking under pressure. And that makes them more dangerous than any criminal I've hunted. Because you can negotiate with greed. You can reason with ambition. But hate. He stared at his distorted reflection in broken glass. Hate only understands one language. And I'm about to teach these bastards the dialect fluently. Apex HV, AC, Miller and Vance. 2 names about to be erased from the living world before sunrise. His network confirmed it, the gray van parked on 132nd Street. 4 hours last Tuesday. Same Tuesday, Sarah Wallace evaporated walking home from school. No work orders filed, no apartments entered. Just 2 white men in matching coveralls watching children pass like window shopping at Macy's. Jerome, a runner who could blend into scenery like smoke, got close enough to read names stitched on shirts. D. Miller. R. Vance. Arrogant. Stupid. The confidence that comes from decades getting away with evil because nobody ever bothered stopping you. Because law looked away. Because black suffering was background noise in white America's symphony. Bumpy called a meeting in 22 West's sub-basement 3 levels down, where walls were thick enough screams died before traveling 10 feet. 6 men showed up. All soldiers who understood some conversations don't happen in daylight. Some problems don't solve with lawyers and paperwork. We're hunting, Bumpy announced without preamble. 2 white men from Westchester been shopping our neighborhood. They took merchandise that doesn't belong to them. We're having a conversation about property rights and consequences. Raymond 6'4". 260 of muscle wrapped around hair-trigger temper, cracked knuckles loud enough to echo off concrete. We doing this in Harlem. Boss. Bumpy shook his head slowly. No, not bringing that heat to our streets. Not with cops hunting excuses to burn what we built. We're going to them. Outside our territory. Rules change. Outside Harlem. I'm just another son. I care in America invisible until I decide being seen. And when Miller and Vance see me, it'll be their last clear thought before hell opens underneath them. Smart. In Harlem, Bumpy was royalty. Royalty has responsibilities, witnesses to protect. Businesses to shield from blowback. Outside Harlem, outside his kingdom. The board tilted his direction. Out there, he was just another black man. The law didn't give 2 shits about until bodies dropped. And by then, too late for complaints, except to the devil. They found the gray van outside a dive called Iron Horse in Yonkers, 43 miles north. Working-class white neighborhood where Confederate flags weren't statements. They were wallpaper. Bumpy watched from across the street, engine idling, as Miller and Vance stumbled out at 11:40. Drunk but not falling down. Loose but not useless. Perfect. They were laughing. Voices loud and careless, the way white men laugh when they've never faced real consequences for anything in their mediocre lives. Vance slapped Miller's back hard enough to make him stumble into a Buick. Neither noticed 5 shadows peeling from the alley behind them. Didn't notice until Bumpy's voice cut through night like a straight razor opening throats. Miller. Vance. He spoke their names like a coroner reading death certificates. "We need discussing your recent shopping trips to Harlem." Both spun around, drunk smiles evaporating like spit on hot iron. Miller's hand dropped to his belt, reaching for a weapon he wasn't fast enough or sober enough to draw. Vance just froze, beer-soaked brain, catching up that 5 black men had materialized from nowhere, blocking the street, and the one in the tailored suit wasn't asking for spare change. "Who the hell?" Miller slurred, trying to inject authority but sounding like a chihuahua barking at wolves. Bumpy stepped into streetlight, didn't raise his voice. Volume is for amateurs. Killers whisper. "I'm the man whose neighborhood you've been hunting in," he said. Each word cold as morgue slabs. "You're telling me where Sarah Wallace is, right now, or I'm breaking small bones, working up to important ones until your memory improves dramatically." Vance tried running. Idiot. Raymond caught him before 5 steps. Massive hand clamping his collar and yanking him backward like a puppet. Vance hit asphalt face first, tasted pavement and copper, felt front teeth shatter against concrete. Miller reached for his belt again, still too slow, still operating on assumptions that black men were supposed to be the ones afraid. Bumpy crossed the distance in 2 strides, drove his fist into Miller's solar plexus with surgical precision. Miller folded like cheap furniture. Air punched from lungs along with bravado, wheezing and clutching his stomach, while his brain tried processing how drinking and laughing turned into this nightmare. "Let's try again," Bumpy said, crouching eye level with Miller's purple, gasping face. "Sarah Wallace, 14 years old. Disappeared 132nd Street last Tuesday. 3:15 p.m. You and your associate parked there in your gray Apex van 4 hours that day, not doing actual work. So either you tell me exactly where she is right now, or I'm tying you both to that van's bumper and dragging you through every Harlem street so every father whose daughter you looked at gets 5 minutes alone with you. Trust me, they'll redefine your understanding of pain in those 5 minutes." Miller's eyes went saucer-wide. Not defiance. Pure animal terror, the kind that evacuates bowels and makes grown men cry for mothers. I don't know." Bumpy grabbed Miller's skull, slammed it against sidewalk. Not permanent damage, just factory resetting priorities. "Wrong answer," Bumpy said quietly. "Every wrong answer costs a bone. Starting small fingers. Toes. Nothing technically necessary for staying alive. But we'll work up. Ribs, kneecaps. Eventually something causing internal bleeding. You'll be conscious throughout. Now, where the fuck is Sarah Wallace?" Laughter was gone. Street went silent except Vance whimpering through broken teeth and Miller's ragged breathing. A dog barked 3 blocks away. A siren wailed in the distance, heading elsewhere, toward someone else's emergency. When Bumpy asked the 3rd time, voice barely above whisper, Miller's resistance collapsed like condemned buildings. "Farmhouse," he gasped. "Westchester. Old Vance family property. There's a cellar under the barn. That's where we keep them." His voice fractured. "That's where." Bumpy stood slowly, looked at Raymond. "Get the address. Get detailed directions. If he's lying, bring me his tongue." He looked down at Miller. Crying now. Snot and tears mixing with blood from where skull kissed pavement. According to those present, the smell of urine suddenly became noticeable as Miller's bladder released. "How many girls there right now?" Miller's mouth opened, closed like fish drowning in air. 3, he finally whispered. "All 3. Still alive. We haven't finished with them yet." Bumpy felt something cold settle in his chest. Finished with them, like projects, hobbies, things to complete and discard. He pulled out his cigarette case, lit a Lucky Strike, took a long drag. Here's what happens, he said, smoke curling from lips like dragon addressing peasants. You're taking us there, walking us right up to that cellar door and opening it, and if those girls aren't exactly where you say, exactly as alive as you claim, what happens next will make your worst nightmares look like Sunday school. He paused, and crystal clear, you're not leaving that farm alive regardless. Only question is whether you die quick or screaming. Answer depends entirely on whether you've been truthful. Miller vomited, just opened his mouth and let it come. Bourbon, bile, terror painting the street. Vance was sobbing openly, broken teeth clicking as he tried forming words through blood. Bumpy took another drag. Watched these two predators reduced to crying children in under 5 minutes. Get them in the car, he told Raymond. We've got girls to bring home, and lessons to teach about what happens when you hunt in the wrong neighborhood. Miller went rigid when they crossed into Westchester. Not cooperation rigor mortis setting in early. Vance whimpered through shattered teeth. But Miller's jaw locked tight. Eyes forward, some reptile part of his brain still clinging to the fantasy that silence could save him. Bumpy sat diagonal, watching him like a butcher sizing up meat. The car reeked of Vance's blood and Miller's sweat sharp, acrid. The smell of men realizing they'd miscalculated badly. You're wasting time, Bumpy said, lighting a cigarette. Orange glow carved shadows across his face, features like granite, eyes empty as bullet holes. Every second you stay quiet is another second those girls spend chained. And every second they spend there is another bone I take from you when this ends. Miller's lips peeled back. You don't understand what you're walking into, he hissed, not defiant warning, like Bumpy should turn around. Go home. Forget he'd ever heard of Westchester. Raymond laughed from the driver's seat, sound like gravel chewing glass. He thinks he's protected, Raymond said. Boss, you want me to pull over, teach him about reality? He'll learn, Bumpy said. They always do, right before they stop learning anything permanent. He leaned close enough Miller could smell tobacco and bourbon. You think you got leverage, friends, weapons, whatever sick game you've been playing. You're wrong. I didn't come to arrest you. I came to erase you. Only question is how loud you scream first. Miller's facade fractured, hairline crack spreading fast. His Adam's apple bobbed, swallowing fear like ground glass. There are others, he whispered. It's organized. You kill us. They'll know. They'll come after you. Let them. Bumpy's voice could have frozen blood. I've been killing men who thought they were bulletproof for 40 years. You're just the latest corpse who didn't believe me until too late. He sat back, exhaled smoke. Now, you're telling me what's in that cellar. How many men? What weapons? Layout. Or Raymond pulls your fingernails with pliers until memory improves. Miller broke. Not gradually, catastrophically. Words vomited out in chunks. There's a journal, he gasped. Ledger. Logs every session. Who came. What we did. Dates. Times. His voice dropped to a whisper. There's a schedule. Rotation. Different members, different nights. We keep records. Documentation is important. Bumpy's blood went arctic. Members, he repeated, voice flat as morgue slabs. You're telling me this is a club, with schedules and meeting minutes. Vance sobbed louder. Miller nodded, tiny movement like admitting it might kill him. 17 members, all vetted, all committed to preserving proper order. The girls aren't random. We select them. Criteria. Age, appearance, defiance levels. It's methodical. He choked. It's necessary. Raymond nearly drove off the road. Boss, let me shoot this motherfucker right. No. Bumpy's voice had gone somewhere beyond rage, into frozen mathematics. 17 men. A journal. Schedules. Selection criteria. This wasn't crime, it was infrastructure. They'd bureaucratized torture, made rape into policy, murder into procedure, and called it necessary. Those present would later describe the silence that followed as suffocating, nearly a full minute where nobody breathed. Bumpy stared at Miller with surgical focus. The journal. Where? Miller's eyes hit the floor. Cellar. Locked box. Far wall. Davis has the key. Bumpy leaned forward. Who's Davis? Tonight's host. He's there now. With the girls. They're scheduled for final processing tonight. That's why we were recruiting. Looking for the next. He couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Bumpy sat back slowly. Looked at Raymond. How far? Raymond checked signs. 12 minutes. Maybe 12 minutes before final processing, whatever sanitized hell that meant. He looked at Miller. You're walking us in. Acting natural. Getting us inside without alerting Davis. You deviate even slightly, blink wrong, I shoot your spine and drag your paralyzed ass inside while you watch me kill everyone you love. Clear. Miller nodded, tears cutting tracks through grime. Bumpy turned to Vance. Both of you are keys. Get us in clean. Maybe you die quick. Fuck this up. You get what you gave them. He crushed his cigarette with enough force to bend the filter. And crystal clear you're not leaving that farm. Neither are your members. This ends tonight. Only question is how many I torture before the rest take the hint. Silence except engine hum and Vance's broken breathing. Outside. Westchester rolled past trees. Darkness. Farmhouses where families slept peacefully, never knowing what happened in cellars 3 miles away. Bumpy checked his watch. 12:47. 17 minutes since Miller started talking. Those 17 minutes had transformed rescue into extermination. Final processing, Bumpy said, tasting poison. You called it that. Final processing. He looked at Miller with scientific fascination, studying a virus under glass. You built a system, paperwork, schedules, made torture efficient, professional. You probably have mission statements and quarterly reviews, don't you? Miller didn't answer. Silence was confession. Bumpy felt something snap loose in his chest. Final restraint breaking like chains under too much weight. He'd killed hundreds. In war, in business, cold calculation. But this required something beyond killing. This required erasing, not just bodies evidence, records, infrastructure. He needed to burn this so thoroughly not even ashes remained. Necessary, he said, almost laughing. You called it necessary. He leaned forward final time. I'm teaching you what necessary really means. Those girls walk out alive. You don't. That journal burns. This farmhouse becomes a mass grave nobody finds. That's necessary. That's order. He sat back. 3 minutes. Raymond. The car turned down a dirt road. Gravel crunched like small bones breaking. In the back seat, Miller and Vance prepared to die. Bumpy Johnson prepared to become the nightmare these monsters had been building toward. Westchester countryside held its breath. Even the crickets had stopped chirping. Raymond killed headlights 200 yards out. The car coasted on momentum, gravel crunching too loud in 1 a.m. silence. The farmhouse sat dark except one yellow window kitchen, where Davis probably sat drinking coffee, checking his watch, counting minutes before going back downstairs to finish what he'd started. The barn squatted behind like a tumor gray wood, sagging roof, the kind of structure that looked abandoned until you saw the new padlock. Bumpy stepped out first. The air smelled wrong, not country fresh, but something rancid underneath grass and pollen. Like meat spoiling in August heat. Like fear soaked into soil until earth itself was contaminated. He breathed it anyway. Let it fuel the cold thing building behind his ribs. Raymond dragged Miller and Vance out by their collars. 45 pressed against Miller's kidney, hard enough to bruise. "Quiet," Bumpy whispered, not request order backed by 30 years of men following his voice into gunfights. Miller opens the door. "First wrong sound, first bad movement. I shoot both knees and finish this loud. Choose cooperation or screaming." Miller nodded, shaking so hard teeth chattered. They moved as one unit, 5 shadows crossing dead grass, boots making sounds like breaking bones. The barn door loomed. Miller fumbled the padlock, key scraping metal 3 times before clicking open. The sound echoed like a gunshot in church, but the yellow window stayed still. Nobody came. Door hinges shrieked like dying animals, inside hay bales, rusted tools, a dead tractor. But the smell was stronger, copper and ammonia, and something sweeter. Sicker. Bodies kept without ventilation, without mercy. Bumpy's eyes adjusted. There, far corner. Hidden behind hay, a trap door. Heavy wood. Iron bands. Flush with floor so you'd walk right over, unless you knew. Down there. Miller nodded. Davis is inside, alone. Doesn't carry guns during sessions. Says it's not sporting. Bumpy wanted to shatter his jaw. Instead, he motioned Raymond forward. "Open it, slow and quiet. We go in fast but controlled. No shots unless necessary. I want those girls out before Davis breathes wrong." Raymond gripped the iron ring. Pulled. The door groaned like earth opening to swallow sinners. Stairs descended into yellow light bare bulb casting everything jaundice. And underneath the hinges, underneath 5 men breathing controlled fury. Another sound drifted up. Singing. Weak, breaking every 3rd word. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Bumpy froze. His body locked. 2 seconds felt like centuries, processing what his ears reported. They were making them sing. Down in that hole, chained to hell. 3 girls sang hymns while waiting to die. The sound barely human anymore, voices shredded by screaming. By terror that had burned through everything except muscle memory of Sunday school. "Boss," Raymond whispered, voice tight. "We move, now." Bumpy's hand found his gun. Not drawing, touching. Grounding himself. Rage was a tool, not master. He looked at Miller. "You first. Down those stairs. Natural. You call Davis. Tell him you brought company. Anything else. You die before hitting bottom. 12 steps. 13. 14. On 15. The cellar opened up and Bumpy's brain tried rejecting what his eyes showed. Concrete bunker. 10 by 20. Reinforced walls. Ventilation shaft. Table with tools arranged by size. Filing cabinet. 3 chains bolted to wall with industrial anchors livestock grade. And at chain ends, 3 girls. Sarah Wallace. Davis girl. Johnson girl. Still breathing. Barely. Clothes shredded. Wrists bleeding from metal cuffs. Hair matted with sweat and worse. Eyes that had seen past humanity's edge and couldn't find the way back. They sang because Davis, standing near them with a clipboard, taking actual notes, had ordered it. They sang because obedience delayed the inevitable. Davis turned when he heard footsteps. Smiled. Actually smiled. Like Miller and Vance were buddies showing up for poker. "You're early," he said, checking his watch. "I wasn't expecting." He stopped, saw guns, saw Bumpy's face. The smile died like something shot in the spine. "Don't move," Bumpy said quietly. "Don't speak. Don't breathe loud. Just stand there understanding you're already dead. Only question is whether these girls watch you die, or whether I'm merciful enough to do it after they're safe." He looked at Raymond. "Get them loose, now." To the others, "Secure Davis. He twitches. Break his legs." The singing stopped. Girls stared at Bumpy like hallucinations, minds finally snapping, generating rescue fantasies to make last moments bearable. Sarah tried speaking. Mouth moved, but only dry leaves scraping concrete came out. Bumpy holstered his gun, moved toward them slow, hands visible, making himself small despite every survival instinct screaming otherwise. "Sarah," he said softly, "your mother sent me. Mrs. Wallace. She wants you home." Sarah's eyes focused, truly focused, first time in days. Recognition sparked, then tears. Not relief tears, something darker. The tears of someone who'd stopped believing rescue was possible, and now had to process that it was real. That deliverance had teeth and a gun, and was standing in her hell promising salvation. Raymond tore through Davis's pockets. Keys. 5 of them. Started trying. First didn't fit. Neither did second. Sarah's singing started again, quiet, broken, record skipping on the same scratch. Third key clicked. Cuffs sprang open. She collapsed forward. Would have hit concrete if Bumpy hadn't caught her. She weighed nothing. They'd been starving her systematically. Probably documented in that goddamn clipboard. Those present would later recount that the sound Sarah made when chains released wasn't crying. It was something pre-language, something animal and ancient. Relief and trauma mixing into noise that would haunt their sleep longer than the violence that followed. The other 2 came free seconds later. Raymond and others carried them toward stairs. They didn't fight, didn't question, just went limp, letting themselves be carried because walking was beyond them. Bumpy stayed below, walked slowly toward Davis, pressed against wall by 2 men, hands zip-tied. Davis trembled, all authority evaporated. "You're making a mistake," he stammered. "We have rights, legal protections, connections. You can't." "Shut up." Bumpy picked up the clipboard Davis had been holding. Read it, felt something inside him die. Session notes, medical observations, endurance metrics. They documented it, treated torture like science, taking notes on breaking timelines, rating reactions, comparing results. He looked at Davis. "You kept records, wrote this down, like homework, like you were proud." Davis opened his mouth. Bumpy's fist closed, it broke his nose, sent blood spraying. Davis crumpled. "Don't talk," Bumpy said. "You're done talking, done writing, done existing meaningfully. But first," he looked around. "First, I understand exactly what I'm burning down." He found the journal. Black leather. Locked. He shot the lock off gunshot, deafening in concrete. Inside names. Dates. Photographs. 17 members. Detailed logs. Every session. Every girl. Not just these 3 others. Dozens over years. Some with check marks. Some with X's. Check marks meant released. X's meant buried. 7 X's last 2 years. Bumpy closed the journal carefully. Looked at Davis crying now. Blood and snot running. "How many buried on this property?" 7. Davis sobbed. "Over 14 years, but we're careful. Only take ones who won't be missed. Street kids. Runaways. We research. We're methodical." Bumpy shot him. Kneecap. Davis screamed high, breaking, sound bouncing off concrete. "Wrong answer. Where are they buried?" Davis, screaming, pointed north wall. Outside. North 40. Marked with stones. Bumpy looked at his men. "Get shovels. Tonight we dig up every girl. Get them home." He looked back at Davis. "And you're watching. Every grave. You'll see what you did before I let you die." The girls didn't speak, reaching surface. Words were beyond them now. Raymond carried Sarah to the car, her arms wrapped around his neck like drowning, and he was the only thing above water. She weighed maybe 90 pounds, systematic starvation. Probably documented in that clipboard, like everything else they'd done. The other two stumbled between Bumpy's men, held upright more than walking, legs having forgotten their purpose after days chained in positions that turned muscles to string and bones to rubber. Bumpy followed, last journal tucked under his arm like evidence for a trial that would never happen. Because there wouldn't be trials. Trials meant cops. Cops meant believing the system worked. Bumpy had stopped believing that when a sergeant tore Mrs. Wallace's photo in half and called her daughter a whore. At the car, Raymond laid Sarah in back, covered her with his jacket. She shook not from cold but shock. Nervous system trying to process that nightmare had ended, but not believing yet. Not trusting this wasn't another trick. Another layer of torture designed to break what remained of hope. "Take them," Bumpy ordered. "Straight to Doc Harris, tell him everything. Get them fed, cleaned, checked for—" He paused, not wanting to say it. Having to anyway. Everything, physical, internal, whatever those animals did. Doc documents it, not for police, for families, so they know, so they can help healing start. Raymond nodded, moving toward driver's seat. Bumpy grabbed his arm. "And Raymond, they don't talk to anyone except Doc and their mothers. No cops, no reporters, no church ladies asking questions. Nobody. We handle this our way." "Understood." "Boss." Engine started. Headlights cut darkness like knives, before pulling away. Sarah's voice drifted through open window, barely audible, wrecked from screaming and singing, but determined to be heard. "The man, Davis, he said others were coming. Tomorrow night. More men. Special event. He said they were bringing someone important. A judge from the city. He said," she coughed blood. "He said we were supposed to be the entertainment." Bumpy's jaw clenched so hard something popped. A judge. Of course, this infection had roots in courtrooms, in places where law was supposed to be sacred. "What judge?" Sarah shook her head. "Didn't say a name, just his honor was coming. That we needed to be ready. Perfect. To make good impressions." Her voice shattered. "You did good. Sarah, you survived. That's all that matters." He stepped back. "Go. Now. Before anyone comes." Taillights faded to red pinpricks, then nothing. Silence rushed back, dangerous country silence where you couldn't hear threats approaching. Bumpy turned back to the barn where 4 men waited with Miller, Vance, and Davis. Time to finish this properly. Davis had stopped screaming. Shock or blood loss from shattered knee. He slumped against wall, hands zip-tied, face pale as paper. Miller and Vance sat in corner, having achieved catatonic acceptance of their final hour. Bumpy descended stairs slowly, each footstep deliberate, letting them hear death approaching in measured rhythm. He walked past the chains where girls had hung, past the table with tools, pliers, knives, cattle prods, implements he couldn't identify and didn't want to. He stopped at filing cabinet, pulled it open. Inside photographs, hundreds, Polaroids documenting sessions spanning years. Girls in various states of. He slammed it shut. Didn't need more images for nightmares. "Journal says 17 members," Bumpy said conversationally, like discussing baseball scores. "I need names, addresses, phone numbers, who they are, what they do, where to find them." He pulled out his pistol, checked cylinder. "Before you try protecting your brothers, understand this I already know about tomorrow's meeting. Big event. Judge coming. Sarah told me. Your last victim gave me intelligence to burn down your entire organization. Poetic. Right. The girl you thought would be entertainment just signed your death warrants. He crouched eye level with Davis. So here's the deal. Give me everything: names, addresses, meeting time, location, security, and I kill you clean. One bullet, or refuse. And I chain you where those girls were chained. Use your own tools on you until you're begging to tell me shit I already know. Choose fast. I'm on a clock. Those present noted Davis broke immediately, not gradually but catastrophically. Like them failing all at once. Names poured out, addresses, occupations. Judge was Howard Brennan, 2nd Circuit. Meeting tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Hunting Lodge in Pound Ridge, 40 minutes north. Security light social gathering, not military operation. They felt safe, protected, untouchable. How many total tomorrow? Davis did mental math. 12, maybe 14. Not everyone attends every meeting, but the judge only comes twice yearly, so turnout will be high. They're excited. Excited. The word made Bumpy want to vomit. Professional men, community pillars, getting excited about torturing children. Miller added details unprompted. Bargaining for quick death Bumpy had promised. Lodge had basement, soundproofed. Used to be wine cellar before conversion. 2 entrances, main stairs inside. Service entrance outside. No windows. Concrete walls. Built specifically for these events. Secure. Private. Perfect. Perfect. Bumpy repeated. You built a bunker to torture children and called it perfect. He stood slowly. Bobby. Marcus, gather everything. Documents, photographs, tools. We're burning this structure. Nothing survives. Vincent, get the van. Load these 3. We're moving. He looked at Davis. And you're helping me find those 7 graves. Everyone. Before sunrise. That's the bargain. You do that. You get the bullet. Clear. Davis nodded. Would have agreed to anything. Bumpy's men moved with veteran efficiency, understanding without words that some nights required speed over planning. Within 20 minutes, everything was loaded. Bumpy doused the cellar in kerosene from the barn, struck a match, watched fire catch and spread, like judgment consuming evidence of sins too dark for human courts. Flames reflected in his eyes climbing stairs. Behind him, cellar became inferno, erasing infrastructure of evil one concrete wall at a time. Barn would burn next, then farmhouse. By sunrise, this property would be ash and unanswerable questions. But first graves, 7 families who'd buried empty caskets, 7 girls erased from the world like they'd never existed. Bumpy was giving them back their daughters. Not alive, but present. Real. Proof they'd lived and mattered, and someone cared enough to dig them up and return them home. He grabbed Davis by collar, hauled him toward North 40, where 7 stones marked 7 unmarked graves. Start walking. Pray to whatever God you think listens that you remembered exactly where you buried them. Because if I'm digging random holes all night looking for children, you killed. Dying becomes the least terrible thing happening to you. Davis walked. Night was long. Shovels were sharp. By the time sun threatened eastern horizon, 7 bodies had been recovered. 7 families would get closure, and 17 men had less than 12 hours left to live. Bumpy looked at farmhouse burning in distance, at journal in his hand, at list of names that would become hit list before nightfall. Tomorrow night, Hunting Lodge, Pound Ridge, 14 men who think they're safe. He looked at his men. They're wrong, and we're teaching them exactly how wrong in ways they'll understand for 30 seconds before they stop understanding anything at all. Bumpy stood in the burned barn, watching dawn crack through charred beams. The math was simple and brutal. Call cops Miller. Vance. Davis walk free. Maybe get charged. Probably get lawyers who golf with judges. Definitely make bail. Then 17 members scatter like rats, destroying evidence, buying alibis, activating protections built over 14 years. The girls testify, get shredded on cross-examination, called liars. The jury, 12 white Westchester faces acquits in under an hour. Or Bumpy ends it, permanently, with fire and bullets in graves nobody finds. He stared at Davis zip-tied to a beam. Miller and Vance slumped nearby. All three had helped dig up 7 bodies in exchange for mercy. Bumpy never planned giving. You thought about calling police, Davis rasped through broken teeth. But you know they'd let us walk. They always. Raymond's .45 pressed against his temple, metal-grinding bone. Boss didn't give permission to talk. Bumpy moved closer, let silence build until it became physical weight. You're right. I thought about it. For 3 seconds. Then I remembered that sergeant tearing Mrs. Wallace's photo in half, calling Sarah a whore. 14 years of you doing this, and not one cop ever noticed Harlem girls disappearing. He crouched eye level with Davis. So no, I'm not trusting a system designed to protect you from consequences. I'm becoming the consequence. Raymond pulled out chains, the same chains that had held Sarah. Heavy iron, still rust-stained with blood. Where you want them? Bumpy pointed to anchor bolts protruding from concrete. Right there, exact same setup. I want them understanding what those girls felt. 10 minutes, Miller begged. Vance sobbed. Davis stayed silent. Words burned away during grave digging. The chains went on with mechanical precision, both wrists. 2 feet of slack. Enough to sit awkwardly or stand, but never comfortable. Never sleeping. Just muscles cramping and joints screaming endlessly. Bumpy stepped back, surveying 3 white men chained in ruins of their own evil. Raymond placed a water bucket 15 feet away, visible. Reachable if they could break chains. Otherwise might as well be on Mars. No food, Bumpy said. Water they can see but can't drink. I want them understanding thirst. How long? Raymond asked. Bumpy checked his watch. 6:47 a.m. 72 hours. Same time Sarah spent down there. Seems fair. He looked at the chained men. Nobody's coming. Your meeting tonight, I'll be there instead. Your 17 members dead by Monday. Your organization erased. No survivors. No records except ash. Davis finally broke. You can't, they're too many. Connected. Powerful. You're just an actor from Harlem. Bumpy finished quietly. That's what you meant. Right, some gangster who doesn't know his place. He smiled without warmth. Here's what you don't understand. In Harlem, I am the law. I'm judge, jury, executioner. Your connections don't reach my world. Your power stops at 110th Street. He stood, brushed ash off his coat. This isn't murder. Murder requires bodies, investigations. This is a disappearance. 3 white men vanished, probably embezzled money, had secret lives. Who knows? Certainly not them. They'll be too busy dying of dehydration to tell anyone. Raymond nodded. The farmhouse Bumpy looked at the smoldering main house. Burn it completely. Gas leak, electrical fire. Something boring. By the time fire trucks arrive, evidence is gone. These 3. He gestured at chained men. Ash and bone fragments, unidentifiable. Miller started screaming then. Not words, animal sounds. Finally understanding this was real. That nobody was coming. That the nightmare had inverted. Bumpy listened 5 seconds, then walked toward the car. The screaming continued. Would continue for hours until throats shredded. You really going to that lodge tonight? Raymond asked. Bumpy nodded. 14 men, all in one place. It's efficient. Clean. He opened the car door. Bring everyone. Every soldier. This isn't a raid, it's extermination. I want overwhelming force. Done in under 10 minutes. So thorough nobody ever whispers about this organization again. They drove away. In the rear view, 3 figures chained in burned ruins shrank, then disappeared. Bumpy didn't look back. Looking back was for men with doubts. Those who witnessed what happened at that barn over 72 hours, the screaming that stopped. Bodies slumping forward. The smell attracting crows would never speak publicly. Some things are too dark for daylight. Harlem doesn't do trial, Bumpy said as they hit the highway. Harlem ends problems. Clean. Final. Forever. He lit a cigarette. Exhaled smoke. By Monday, this organization never existed. By Tuesday, those girls are safe in new cities. By Wednesday, I'm playing cards like none of this happened. He paused. That's how you handle problems the law can't fix. You become the law. Mrs. Wallace opened her door at 8:47 a.m. and found Sarah on the stoop. No warning, no fanfare. Just her daughter standing there wrapped in Raymond's jacket, barely upright, but breathing. The reunion happened without words. Some moments are too big for language. Mrs. Wallace's hands went to Sarah's face, checking, confirming this wasn't a ghost or trick. Sarah collapsed into her mother's arms. They sank to the floor right there in the doorway, holding each other while Harlem walked past, pretending not to see. Giving them privacy because that's what you do witnessing something sacred. Bumpy watched from across the street. Didn't approach. Didn't need gratitude. He'd done what needed doing. 3 girls taken. 3 returned. Simple mathematics. He started the engine, drove to the next address. Davis family. Then Johnson's. 3 reunions. 3 mothers getting daughters back from death's door. Doc Harris had worked all night. Fed them. Stitched wounds. Documented injuries with clinical precision that would never see a courtroom, but would help families understand what healing might look like. He'd given sedatives, antibiotics, and most importantly, silence. No questions, just medicine and mercy without paperwork. By noon, all 3 families were packing. Bumpy had arranged everything: train tickets, new addresses, jobs waiting in Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia. Cities big enough to disappear. Far enough that if any members survived tonight, they'd never find these girls. The families understood without being told staying meant danger. Better to ghost. Vanish into America's urban sprawl, where black families were just faces in crowds. They're really leaving? Raymond asked, watching the Wallace family load a borrowed Buick. Bumpy nodded. By tonight, all 3 families gone. New names. New lives. Fresh start. Only way. He paused. They stay. They're targets. Witnesses. They leave. They're just more families heading north for factory work. Nobody looks twice. Sarah appeared in the doorway one last time. Looked directly at Bumpy. Held his gaze 5 seconds. Didn't smile. Smiling was years away. But she nodded once. Slowly. A veteran recognizing another veteran. Someone who'd seen hell acknowledging someone who'd walked into hell to pull her out. Then she got in the car. The Buick pulled away. Gone. She'll never tell, Raymond said. Bumpy lit a cigarette. She'll tell. Just not complete stories. Not names. But she'll tell her children that once. Something terrible happened. And someone came. Someone without a badge. Someone who just fixed it. He exhaled smoke. That's how legends start. Not with facts, with fragments. Harlem noticed the girls were back. Of course it did. But Harlem also knew when to be blind. By afternoon, whispers started Sarah home safe. Praise Jesus. Must have run away. The Davis girl, too. Johnson girl. Miracle. Didn't matter that nobody believed it. The official story was miracle. And challenging. That meant asking questions. Nobody wanted answered. The families left in stages. Wallace by car. Davis by train. Johnson by bus. All gone by sunset. 3 empty apartments. 3 holes in Harlem's fabric that would close quickly. By next week, new families would move in. By next month, only old folks would remember 3 girls disappeared and came back and disappeared again. But this time toward futures instead of graves. Bumpy returned to 22 West at 7 p.m. The card game had resumed. Same players, same table. Eddie was dealing when Bumpy walked in. Conversation died. Every man knew something had happened. Knew Bumpy had been gone 48 hours and come back different, sharper, quieter, more dangerous for the silence. "Girls?" Eddie asked. One word. Bumpy sat down, picked up cards. Safe, gone, new lives, nobody finds them. Ever. The game continued. Cards fell. Chips moved. Outside. Harlem settled into Saturday night rhythms music. Laughter. The normal soundtrack of a neighborhood finally exhaling after 8 days holding its breath. Later, when stories were told and retold and polished into legend, people would say 3 girls vanished and came back and vanished again, and nobody knew how. Would say Bumpy Johnson had something to do with it, but asking direct questions was dangerous. Would say sometimes, when law fails, other options exist. Darker options. Options without paperwork. Options that work. The safest miracles, one old-timer said years later, whiskey loosening his tongue, are ones without paperwork, where everybody agrees to remember differently, where the official story is so boring nobody questions it. He finished his drink. That's how you save lives in a world that doesn't value them. You lie. You hide. You make evidence disappear. And you make damn sure the monsters die quietly. Bumpy sat alone in 22 West's back room at 11 p.m., picking up chess pieces one by one, returning them to starting positions. The board looked normal now. Organized. Ready for a new game. But pieces new. Blood doesn't wash off ivory. It soaks in until stain becomes structure. In his jacket pocket. 3 keys on a ring. Small. Iron. The kind opening barn doors and cellar trapdoors. He'd taken them from Davis before leaving Westchester. Meant to throw them in the East River. Hadn't. They stayed in his pocket like weight. Like evidence. Like reminder that some doors, once opened, don't fully close. Raymond appeared in the doorway. "Lodge is in 1 hour. Everyone's ready. 14 targets confirmed. We're going in dark. No witnesses, no survivors. In and out in 8 minutes. He paused. "You sure 14 men at once? That's a lot of bodies." "It's not enough," Bumpy said quietly. Still arranging pieces. 17 total. We're 3 short, but 14 is what we've got tonight, so 14 is what we take. He stood, pulled on his jacket, felt keys shift weight. This is surgery, cutting out cancer before it spreads, before anyone thinks it can be rebuilt. The drive to Pound Ridge took 43 minutes. 3 cars. 15 men total, all veterans, understanding tonight wasn't about territory or money. Tonight was about erasure. Making sure a thing that shouldn't exist stopped existing so thoroughly not even the idea survived. The hunting lodge sat in pine trees at a gravel driveway's end. Lights blazed. Expensive cars filled parking, luxury sedans judges and lawyers drove. Inside, 14 men gathered in the basement for what they thought was entertainment, what they thought was safe. They were wrong about everything. Bumpy's team moved like smoke. 2 men on service entrance, 4 on main door. Rest covering exits. At exactly 8:47 p.m., the time Mrs. Wallace had found Sarah alive, they breached. The basement was exactly what Miller described. Soundproofed, concrete walls, wine racks converted to display other things. 14 men sat around a table, Judge Brennan at the head, looking at photographs, laughing, planning. One man was saying next month's acquisition when doors blew open and Bumpy's team poured in like judgment, wearing suits and carrying .45s. What happened next took 6 minutes, not 8. 14 men so confident none carried weapons. None had guards. 14 years of operating without consequences came due at once. Those who participated were forbidden from speaking of it, but the result was clear: 14 bodies, no survivors. Evidence collected: more journals, more photographs, all loaded into cars, all burned in Harlem metalworks before sunrise, all erased. The lodge burned. Gas leak. The fire marshal ruled. Tragic. 14 prominent men dead in terrible accident. Communities mourning. Secrets buried under ash and official reports asking no uncomfortable questions because comfortable lies were easier than uncomfortable truths. Bumpy returned to 22 West at 4 a.m. The chessboard sat where he'd left it. He picked up the Black King, placed it back. His hands were steady. Steady hands don't mean clean hands, just experienced hands that have learned carrying weight without shaking. He pulled out the keys, held them in his palm, feeling their weight, their coldness. He'd meant to throw them away, but he kept them. Why? Because forgetting was dangerous, because the keys were a reminder that some problems can't be solved with lawyers and systems designed to protect everyone equally, because those systems don't protect everyone equally and never have. The keys went back in his pocket. They would stay there. He would feel them every time he reached for his wallet or cigarettes. Would remember what they opened and what he'd found and what he'd done. That was the price, not guilt. Bumpy felt none for ending monsters, but memory, permanent weight of having seen humanity's worst and having responded with calculated brutality matching the crime. Eddie appeared early. Boss, everything. Bumpy nodded. Everything's handled. Done. Over. Girls are safe. Family's gone. Men who hurt them don't exist anymore. He paused. Nobody asks details. Nobody digs. What happened is finished. History. We move forward. Eddie understood without understanding, knew without knowing. That was the agreement. How you survived in a world where law enforcement worked for some against others, where justice was commodity purchased by powerful and denied to powerless. Cards tonight. Bumpy looked at the chessboard one final time. Pieces arranged perfectly. Order restored. Illusion maintained. Yeah, cards tonight. Same time. Same game. He walked to the window, looked out at Harlem waking to Sunday morning. Church bells would ring soon. Preachers would talk about forgiveness and mercy. And everyone would pretend monsters didn't exist and that sometimes, when they did, they didn't require hunting by men willing to become temporary monsters themselves. The keys sat heavy in his pocket. Would always sit heavy. That was the price of doing what others couldn't or wouldn't. If asked, would you call cops and trust the system, or handle it yourself, knowing your hands would never be fully clean, the answer was in his pocket. 3 iron keys, 3 doors kicked open, 3 promises kept. Girls lived. Families were safe. Monsters died screaming. Not justice by legal definition, but justice nonetheless. The kind that works. The kind that ends problems instead of filing them away. Bumpy touched the keys one more time, felt their cold metal truth, and decided yes, he'd be ready when justice came collecting. Because men who do what needs doing always are. 3 girls walked out alive. 17 men didn't walk out at all. Bumpy Johnson never touched those keys again, but he never threw them away either. That's the difference between law and justice. Law writes reports. Justice writes obituaries. If this story grabbed you by the throat and didn't let go, smash that subscribe button. We're bringing you the stories history tried to erase. The nights where badges stayed home and bullets did the talking. The men who built empires on blood and called it order. Tomorrow, another ghost from Harlem's darkest hours. See you in the shadows.